All right, I'm here with Paul Reeths, author of the United States Football League from 1982 to 1986. Welcome to the program. I appreciate you stopping by.
Thank you for having me, Mark.
Okay, so first, as a guy who wrote a book about the USFL, clearly you're a big USFL fan. What was your reaction when you heard the news that the USFL was coming back?
Well, not surprisingly, I have a great deal of nostalgic feelings about the old USFL. And so, when I first heard the announcement that a league named the United States Football League planned to play, I was pretty excited. Um, I will say that some of my excitement has been tempered since then.
Okay. How so? I mean, but you heard that like Fox is involved and like all this kind of thing. So what do you mean like tempered? Why?
So I think that one of the big things to keep in mind is that the original United States Football League was a major league. One of the reasons why people have such good feelings about it was they remember the quality of play in the league. Future Hall of Famers like Steve Young, Reggie White, Jim Kelly cut their teeth in the league, and then the league was very competitive with then current NFL players as well. So it was signing quality, proven talent right from the get-go.
Mhm.
Now the climate today won't allow that. It's just too expensive to go after NFL talent. So this is not at all to denigrate kind of the current efforts, the XFLs and the Alliance of American Football, all of which I've enjoyed. I really do enjoy it, but it just feels to me like this new entity is kind of trying to glom on to some of these old nostalgic feelings for what was a major league,
Mhm.
but they're really not going to be running the same type of operation, really, because they can't. You can't, even Fox can't compete with 32 NFL owners and the money that they're paying them.
Yeah. So I mean, so you heard about the bubble season that'll take place in Alabama, that they're bringing back some of these names, not all of them, and then their hope is in 3 years' time that the league will flourish and will have their own cities and that kind of thing. So you said you did watch the XFL and AAF, and these guys are basically their approach is a little different than the original, the XFL and AAF. They just kind of came out where the USFL is trying to come to a slow build. As somebody who wrote about the USFL, how do you feel about this kind of slow build approach by the USFL?
I am really more of a go big or go home kind of guy. What this reminds me of a lot is the United Football League, where they launched a 4-team test season.
Uh-huh.
It's outdoor football. It's been done for decades, 100 years, more than 100 years now. What do you need to test? I kind of got that in 1987 when the Arena Football League launched. You're doing a really new thing. You want to see if guys are going to get killed hitting into the boards, or how the kickoffs work off the nets. I understood that. I understood doing a test season for that. I don't understand a bubble season in 2022. I would have understood a bubble season maybe even early this year or last year, certainly. And I don't understand a half bubble season planned in 2023. I mean, if you're going to do this, I think you get into the local markets, all the local markets, and you establish yourself and you see what works and what doesn't.
Yeah, interesting. So, what was your reaction watching the XFL and AAF, those leagues?
So I enjoyed them. The original XFL, I think the expectations were too high. It was trying to stay on primetime network television when Monday Night Football's ratings were dropping consistently on ABC. It was having a hard time staying on network television. And so for the XFL to do that on a Saturday, which is a down viewership night, I just didn't think that was a viable plan. But I did enjoy, if you got outside some of the WWE theatrics, I did enjoy the football itself. And I felt that it improved, and I felt that I think it's fun to see guys getting a chance and going out there and giving everything they have. And it doesn't have to be about the big names and about almost a cult of personality that develops around major league sports. It can be a lot of fun. It's a different animal than a major league. And that's fine, as long as you're kind of just upfront and honest about what it is.
Yeah. So what about the 2.0 era that got shut down because of, COVID and all that stuff? Did you watch any of those games before they closed shop?
Virtually all of them. Yeah.
Okay.
Enjoyed it too. Had my kids watching AAF, had them watching the XFL. I think that there's something fun about being in on the ground floor of something.
Oh yeah.
Unfortunately, lately we haven't been able to get off the ground floor. We haven't been able to get through a year even.
Yeah. So how did you get into the USFL?
So as a pretty young guy when the USFL launched, so just really getting into football. And I was just, it was just such a great experience being able to have year-round professional football. And again, this was a major league. So you had Herschel Walker, the best college player in the country. All of a sudden, he's playing just after the Super Bowl ends. You have, just talent like Anthony Carter and Bobby Hebert and all the guys that George Allen brought into the Chicago team. All the NFL talent, and playing at a normally off time of year. And at that time, the draft wasn't as big of a deal. There wasn't free agency. So when the NFL was done with the Pro Bowl the week after the Super Bowl was when it was played at that time, pro football was largely done until training camps broke. So it was just a boon. And to see the talent that the league was able to assemble, just a ton of fun for me.
Now, did you go to games, or were you just watching it on TV? Like, where was your fandom or at?
Yeah, television. I grew up in central Wisconsin, so there wasn't really a very close team.
Yeah.
So, watch the TV games. And of course that was when ESPN was still kind of in its infancy. Mm-hmm. And the USFL was big on ESPN. It was the highest rated property on the network, really responsible for a lot of the network's growth in the early years. People look back on ESPN and they don't realize that it was owned by an oil company at the time, and they didn't know what to do with it. And there was still a lot of question about, is this a viable thing? Cable TV was still growing, and people didn't know, but the USFL was really the property that really helped propel ESPN in its early years.
Oh, interesting. And so the USFL comes in, they got all this big talent. Then what were the problems that started? I mean, because it's the only spring league that's lasted more than a couple of years. What was kind of its downfall?
I think the downfall, to be honest, was that it was a major league. That you kind of look back on the history, especially in the latter part of the 20th century, and all the alternative leagues that launched, including, the All-American Football Conference was just before the midpoint of the century. But then after that, you had the American Football League, the American Basketball Association, the World Hockey Association. And so you had all these major league competitors. Well, the USFL was really the last one in the line. And the reason why we haven't had any more since then is that the television money that the major leagues get has made them almost unassailable. It would take the most unlikely collection of billionaires working together to even be able to hold on for a few years. And so it just hasn't happened. It hasn't just been in football. Nobody's launched in basketball, nobody's launched in hockey, and nobody's launched in baseball. And the reason for that is, there's just too much network television money coming to the leagues to where the gates are too high. And that the USFL, I think, really launched at a time when that was just starting. The USFL lasted for 3 full seasons. And a lot of people look at the league in terms of failure. Why did it fail? I've almost taken the opinion that it's nearly miraculous that it lasted as long as it did. And it didn't miss games, and it did its thing. And it did so when nobody else has been able to launch. It's certainly a lot easier. It was a lot easier to launch a basketball or hockey league, but nobody had done it since the ABA and WHA, and certainly football is where your bar is the highest. So the fact that it lasted all 3 seasons is a near miracle.
So what could it, if it had lasted longer, like what would have, like I've heard things about the USFL. I've heard about Donald Trump, that he kind of ruined things, but I don't know about that. I've heard that, they tried to move from the spring to the fall, and if they had stayed in the fall, then the league could potentially still be here today. What was somebody who within, that wrote the book about it? What do you think was kind of the big, were those catalysts, or was it just the timing?
So let's start with Trump, and let's take an apolitical approach that neither indemnifies nor demonizes him. He spent a lot on talent. He wasn't the first guy. He came in year 2, and by then the league was already way over budget. They had already made an exception where they were going to compete for kind of 3 to 6 round draft picks and some almost marginal or backup NFL talent, or guys who needed more of an opportunity, maybe starter level, but needed more of an opportunity. Then they made some exceptions. All right, we're going to have kind of 2 marquee players per team that we can sign. Then they signed Herschel Walker. George Allen in Chicago is signing everybody he can get a name on a contract. So it's just, you had very competitive business people who were very used to succeeding. And so they wanted to succeed on the field. The Michigan Panthers found themselves in a hole to begin the season. They weren't protecting their quarterback. So they went out and signed the Pittsburgh Steelers offensive line. Those things, at the time, they were bargains, but they all cost money, and they all blew up the salary structure. And the revenues that were available in the spring, particularly television revenues, couldn't keep up with the spending. Now, Trump and some of the guys who came in the second year probably accelerated that. Mm-hmm. But that's also why the league is remembered so fondly, is that they had this great talent. So I think it was well on its path. I think that the fiscal discipline that would have been needed to keep the league afloat, I don't know that it's possible when you have a group of businessmen who are competitive funding the whole thing.
So essentially, the owners by overspending and not having that structure kind of just made it, in a sense, collapse on itself then.
And I think that the argument can be, yes, I think that that's what ended up happening. Now, if they had not done that, if they had not spent the money, then maybe the interest isn't there.
True.
Maybe that you had a huge boost with the Herschel Walker signing coming into year 1. It was a great, amongst the American public at large, and then especially among sports fans, you had a great recognition of what the USFL was before it ever took the field because of that publicity that it had generated. Mm-hmm. The week 1 ratings were almost NFL ratings, and it was because of what they had done there. So if you don't spend, you're trying to do almost like an NFL Europe level or an XFL level, before any of that had been done. Mm-hmm. And we've seen that they haven't been able to keep it afloat either.
Yeah. So what about the idea that that they were trying, what killed the league was trying to move to play in the fall? Was that really serious, or were they always going to stick with the spring?
There were some owners who wanted to play regardless of season, but I think that really the move to the fall was to try to force something with the NFL.
Some type of merger.
Yeah, an accommodation of some kind, probably closer to what the American Basketball Association had with the NBA, where you accept a certain number of teams and then everybody else who still has a team gets paid off to go away.
Gotcha. So it was more of a last ditch, let's get the league to merge with the The owners
Yeah.
wanted it to merge with the NFL more than that they were actually seriously thinking that they could compete in the fall against the NFL.
That's my belief. I think that there were some owners who were ready to give it a go in the fall.
Wow.
And particularly, you look back on it, and with the growth of ESPN, if they had been able to make it through 2-3 years with just ESPN, the behemoth that ESPN became, would that have given them more leverage? It would have been tremendously expensive, though, to make it through even a couple more seasons. And you didn't have ownership anymore. You would have lost Trump in New York. You had no ownership there. You had already lost Los Angeles. Chicago was technically still a league member, but hadn't fielded a team since 1984. So you had no teams in the biggest markets in the U.S. then, and so that I don't look upon it as something that was going to happen.
Gotcha. Interesting. And so my final question is, so do you think spring football in the United States in 2021 coming into now we're 2022 where the USFL is starting 2023 XFL, do you think spring football can work in the United States? Do you think somebody can get it going to that where it would work?
What I think is that the piece of the puzzle that's missing is media rights. Is that is such a huge piece of what makes the NFL successful, with so much of their revenue coming off of television rights. You can't generate it with in-stadium attendance. You're going to have lower than fall numbers in-stadium attendance in the spring and summer. You're going to have lower ticket prices. So they can reasonably project what they can make with in-stadium attendance. The rest of it has to be made up with media rights or some other piece. So Fox taking an ownership stake, I think, is a little bit of a recognition that we need to cut out middlemen here. And we need to see, essentially capture all the broadcast revenues. We're going to be the ones selling the advertising. So we're going to see the entire revenue picture here. I think that helps. It's going to have to show that it has staying power. It's going to certainly lose money for that 3 to 5 year span, and significant money. So you got to be able to hold on that long. And then you have to be able to figure out that extra piece. I think the Alliance kind of had this idea with gambling and with an app and some kind of monetization strategy that I didn't wholly understand. But I think they understood the problem. I'm not sure that they had a grasp on any kind of solution there. And so I think that this is another attempt with network ownership that, maybe this works. Again, what's kind of left, bad taste in my mouth a little bit is that this is supposed to honor the old USFL. It's supposed to recognize what it had done before. And yet they're almost trying to do this end around on the guys who used to be involved with the names and logos. I don't know how you honor anything by trying to work around rather than with the people who were involved originally.
Gotcha.
So, I would hope that it, not only the players and the coaches, but the administration and the owners who had lost tremendous amount of money would be kind of invited into this process. If you truly want to make this, something that recognizes and in some kind of way builds off all the goodwill that the original USFL engendered.
Interesting. Final question. If you're a betting man, 3 years from now, USFL, XFL, or nothing, what do you think is left standing in 3 years from now?
I do not bet at all. The history of spring football, particularly the recent history, is not good. So if I'm looking to play the odds, I'm not jumping into that pool at all. But competition is good. I think, though, that there should be a way for these groups to work together, because I think that it's going to be a tough slog for anybody. And getting through those first few years is going to be vitally important, because you're gonna lose tons of money. And just, I mean, if we think about what if you had that Redbird Capital money and the Fox money, then the Redbird Capital is the other half of the USFL equation, or vice versa.
Yeah.
Yeah. It would be nice to see, something work in the spring. It'd be tremendous fun because I do enjoy it.
Yeah, it's fun. So you'll be watching in the spring USFL games?
I'll be watching. Yes. Yeah. I'll be pulling for, whoever launches.
Who was your team in the USFL?
I really loved them all, but I don't think you can beat those Michigan Panthers helmets. Those are great.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, Paul, thanks for stopping in with us, and check out his book. He's the author of the United States Football League from 1982 to 1986. Thanks for being on the show.
All right. Thank you, Mark. And you can find the book on Amazon. Just search my last name or that title.
All right. Excellent. Thank you so
much.
Right,
thank you, Mark.